Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Rogers, Jerry Grout, Director of Education and Engagement, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's program, an exploration of and dialogue about the transcendental art of Beth Ames Swartz. Our program is a collaboration with Arizona State University's Department of Jewish Studies, and I want to thank Hava Tyrosh Samuelson, Lisa Kaplan, Susan Johnson, Penelope Price, and of course, Beth Ames Swartz for the helping to put tonight's program together. To begin, I would like to introduce singer, poet, chantress, and cantorial soloist, Pinna Joseph, who is going to help set the mood for tonight's brilliant program. Please give a warm welcome to Pinna Joseph.
Oh yeah, ayo,
Thank you, Pinna. That was incredible. Now I'd like to introduce tonight's introducer of the program, Professor Hava Tyrosh Samuelson, who is an intellectual historian who focuses on the interplay of philosophy and mysticism, Judaism and science, and Judaism and ecology. She is Regents Professor of History, Irving and Miriam Loeb Professor of Modern Judaism, and Director of Jewish Studies at Arizona State University. Please welcome Professor Tyrosh Samuelson.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all. Actually, it's the first time I've been in this very space, wonderful space. So I'm the Director of Jewish Studies at ASU, and for the past 15 years in this position, we have done quite a lot. We offer numerous lectures, conferences, workshops, exhibits that cover the entire gamut of the Jewish historical experience, from antiquity to the present. And we seek to reach not only the undergraduate and graduate students at ASU, but also everybody who is a lifelong learner here in metropolitan Phoenix. Over the years, we have paid attention to Judaism and the arts, especially to music, to dance, and to literature. But in fact, we've never done any program, which is amazing, about the representational arts, whether it's painting, drawing, sculpting, whatever it is. We have not done anything about it, which is quite amazing, and why I'm so happy that we have this opportunity to put together this conversation and attention to the wonderful work of Beth Ames Swartz. So her work has been featured in many museum collections. I'll just mention some of them: the Jewish Museum, the Smithsonian, the National Museum of American Art, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and of course the Phoenix Art Museum. And the list can go on and on. Many of you in the room probably own pieces that were done by Ms. Swartz. So for me, her work is fascinating because it raises the question of the meaning of Jewish art. Is there such a thing as Jewish art? What makes one a Jewish artist? What can the art of Ms. Swartz teach us about American art and about American Jewish art? The art historian Matthew Beigel situated Beth Ames Swartz in the generation of American Jewish artists born between 1930 and 1960 who, and I'm now quoting from him, see themselves as Americans who happen to be Jewish, not as Jews who happen to be American. They also say, these people, the artists, that they prefer to be known as artists who are Jewish rather than to be tagged as Jewish artists. So this is really the heart of the problem here, or the issue that is of interest to us. Beth Ames Swartz resists simplistic labels because she's a deep spiritual seeker who has been inspired by many intellectual, religious, and wisdom traditions, including, and now there's a long list, Native American spirituality, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jewish mysticism, Chinese healing arts, Christianity, Sufism, and we can probably add a few more. So in conversation with all of these rich and diverse religious and wisdom traditions, she has wrestled with the meaning of life, meaning of death, what is creativity, what is pain, what is suffering. And her powerful art reflects not only her own imaginative inner life and her own personal struggles and quest for wisdom, but also her response to societal challenges that have addressed that she has addressed as a Jewish woman and an artist. This is another reason why her work resonates so much with me, because she engages societal movements such as feminism and environmentalism, two movements that I'm very connected with, and she's most concerned with societal inequality and injustice. In her own unique and highly original visual style, Beth Ames Swartz has confronted these challenges, and she was motivated and still motivated by the Jewish ideal of Tikkun Olam, namely the commitment to repair the broken world and make it a little bit more just, verdant, and peaceful place. As an ecofeminist artist, she shows us how to appreciate our connectedness to the earth, to water, soil, fire, and their healing powers, and how to see ourselves as part of the cycle of birth, life, aging, death, and renewal. To shed light on Beth's lifelong career and her creativity, we're very fortunate to have with us Professor Susan Alberth, who is the Edith C. Blum Professor of Art History at Bard College, New York. Her research interests are very broad, and they cover, again, long list: Latin American art, modernism and surrealism, women's artists, African religious practices in the Americas, and the 20th century Mexican art. So this and many more topics. Otherwise, we will be here a long time if I cover everything she's interested in. She's also a close friend of Beth, and she herself is also very interested in art, in the occult traditions, in spirituality and spiritualism in the United States, in visionary art that make her particularly, because of those interests, she's particularly insightful about the work of Beth Swartz. So without further ado, I'm going to thank Paul Rogers, the Education and Engagement Director here in the museum, and all his staff members who put together this program. Professor Aberth is going to give us a presentation that will really shed light on what we've just seen. And then there's going to be a conversation between Professor Aberth and Beth Ames Swartz. So please enjoy a wonderful evening, and thank you for coming.
So after a while of studying her very long career, I'm increasingly impressed not only by its wide scope and pioneering construction processes, but by the artist's brave exploration of spiritual content. In an art world often overtly hostile to anything except the secular, and especially so when it comes from a woman. I'm glad you all got a chance to see the video, but I'm not even going to begin to attempt to present an overview of her work. It's impossible. Instead, I would like to concentrate on placing her work within the context of other fascinating women artists who have also engaged with the spiritual. And this is a history that has been ignored, suppressed, and even ridiculed for a variety of reasons in the history of art. Well, who am I? I have spent my entire career, to the best of my ability, attempting to reclaim underappreciated artists who deal with the esoteric, by which I mean the mystical branches of traditional religions, as well as the occult and New Age practices. I have written extensively on the British-born surrealist Leonora Carrington, who lives in Mexico, who lived there. I worked with her very closely for 10 years and was able to reveal all of her interests in alchemy, the Kabbalah, tarot, and other forms of magic. I have to say that I changed the reception of her work. I remember my dissertation advisors telling me, but her work is about fairy tales. So a deeper dive really revealed things. And I also worked on many different artists. Often artists' children come to me and say, hey, I have this work by my mother, and can you look into it? And that was the case with Juanita Guccione. I also had the honor of working with the Phoenix Art Museum. I contributed an essay to their amazing, groundbreaking exhibition in 2019 on Agnes Pelton, a show that explored, among other things, this American artist's esoteric use of color and form in her meditative transformations of landscape. But it was the exhibition of the Swedish woman artist Hilma af Klint at the Guggenheim Museum of Art in 2018 that forever changed how art with spiritual content would be viewed. Did any of you here get to go to that show? All right. One person? Two people? All right. Well, aptly titled Paintings for the Future, it caused a cultural sensation. It broke all attendance records in the history of the Guggenheim Museum. Af Klint was an artist and part of a group of mediums who channeled messages from entities from the spirit world that commanded them to create enormous and abstract works for the purpose of healing and enlightening humanity. Deemed to be too radical to understand, these paintings had been hidden away for decades, and now it seemed the world was finally ready, because the fervent interest they generated by audiences who waited in long lines every day to see them was unexpected in the art world. What changed? Years of feminist demands for inclusion in art is what happened. And with that inclusion came different ideas of what and who was important in art history. This explains why Beth Swartz had to work in isolation for decades with little recognition, but it also signals that that is about to change as the world catches up with her and is now ready to receive her visual messages. Let's go back to the Guggenheim. That museum actually really did understand why Hilma was so popular. And the reason they understood it was their collection was full of Kandinsky's and Mondrian's. And those artists came from the same spiritual sources as Hilma af Klint, and that was theosophy. Kandinsky even wrote a book that was inspired by theosophy, titled Concerning the Spiritual in Art, that has been read by countless artists, including Beth Swartz. Well, part of the late 19th century occult revival, theosophy was launched in 1975 in New York City by a Russian immigrant named Helena Blavatsky. It was a philosophy that attempted to combine Eastern and Western ideas, particularly Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism, introducing notions for the first time to popular culture like karma and reincarnation and yoga, which now are very commonplace. It promoted universal brotherhood and claimed to be informed by a secret brotherhood of ascended masters who were repositories of ancient esoteric knowledge. A French woman named Annie Besant, you see her photograph there, took over after Blavatsky, and her ideas would strongly impact the arts. And let's stop and note, it was an organization of worldwide popularity and importance, founded and run by women, unheard of. In 1901, Annie Besant and another theosophist named Leadbeater put out a book that would greatly influence 20th century thought. It was called Thought Forms. This book can still be purchased today, and if you want, you can go home and download it for free. If you don't have it, do so. It's really fascinating still. Note the theosophical emblem on the cover. You'll see it's a combination of various religious symbols, but at the center is the seal of Solomon. Why is that? And that's an interesting story too. Annie Besant was a firebrand, and it was she who literally forced the male secret society of Freemasonry to accept women in France. And France is the only country where women are accepted, nowhere else, into Freemasonry. And maybe you do or do not know that the center of all Masonic ritual is a reenactment of various stories set within the Temple of Solomon. So the most important aspect of this book, however, was the inclusion of a chart that outlined the spiritual energies associated with each color. Again, this would be hugely influential, and I dare say it still is. Not only that, but the book included forms kind of channeled by various mediums that addressed psychic states of mind. For example, that pink cloud represents pure affection. Diagonal lines were dynamics and onward. So negative and positive forms, colors, and movement. This is the basis of all of Kandinsky's artwork, right? So abstraction has always been based in theosophical and occult thought. It didn't stop there. Theosophy put out a good number of books. If you go to used bookstores, you can get some really good vintage copies. For example, Leadbeater put out Man, Visible and Invisible, which had beautiful illustrations that revealed the auras surrounding individuals and how you could determine via colors the difference between undeveloped versus spiritually evolved people. Now, at the same time, all this was happening, in England, another esoteric group was formed in 1888, one that demanded from the very beginning equality between the sexes. Called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, like Theosophy, it sought to combine and integrate the mystical elements of many different religions, but it was different in that it was a magical and not a philosophical group with secret initiations and magical rituals. One of their contributions into what was essentially a Western Christian occult tradition was the inclusion of what they called the Hermetic Kabbalah. Their particular translation of Jewish mystical tradition utilized the tree of life as a central magical tool of instruction. And by the way, it is the center today of all operating occult orders in the world. Jumping further ahead later into the 20th century, at some point post-World War II, most forms of religious expression were considered retrogressive to modernism, and in particular to all forms of esotericism. They were banned, and they were considered feminine and contrary to the robustly masculine New American abstract expressionist movement pushed by the New York art world. So for example, I kind of specialize in surrealism. The surrealists lived in New York City during the war. They were in exile, and they were very interested in magic. When they returned to France in 46 and 47, they had a large exhibition titled Magic, and it bombed, totally bombed, because after World War II, no one wanted to hear about anything irrational. They'd had enough. Understandable. So artists working in the US in particular were really intimidated, not to mention that their work had any spiritual content at all. Some rebelled. For example, Louise Nevelson designed work for both Jewish temples and Christian churches. And of course, there is the non-denominational Rothko Chapel, referred to as a space for contemplation. Nothing spiritual. So now, with what I hope gave you a little bit more of a background, I'd like to turn to her work, to Beth's work, and we'll begin with the work that was inspired by her visit to this very chapel. And I assume you've all been there? Most of you have been to it. It's the most wonderful place. A good reason to go to Houston. Okay, a moving point of balance. So when Beth Swartz visited the Rothko Chapel, she immediately saw its potential and she envisioned a new work. Also, it was to be non-denominational and contemplative, a peaceful environment, but with an added multisensory element designed to create a participatory healing environment. Okay, so participatory is the operative word here, that wove together her paintings with light projections and especially commissioned sacred music. The artist made pilgrimages to 7 sacred sites where she conducted rituals, 2 in France and the remaining 5 in the US, corresponding to various Indigenous American sacred locations. What is so extraordinary about this work is that it asks the viewer to actively participate in an experience meant to magically alter them in some fashion. Much performance art has the viewer passively witnessing it, but those here who agreed to enter the space of a moving point of balance were engulfed in colored light baths that Annie Besant would have approved of in thought forms. Each of the 7 paintings corresponded to a chakra, the 7 centers of power in the body according to Indian thought, each with its own color. In front of each large-size painting, viewers were instructed to conduct different meditations focusing on healing psychic wounds. Many viewers were moved to tears and expressed gratitude for the experience, saying it was life-changing. It traveled to 12 locations across the United States over a 5-year period. Give you some close-ups of those beautiful paintings. So each chakra corresponded to a sacred location, as I said before, and attempted inclusivity. The heart chakra, for example, represented Prophecy Rock in Hopiland, Arizona, and the artist visited there personally and was inspired by their legend of the one-hearted people engraved on a rock. The crown chakra painting was inspired by a visit to the megalithic standing stones of Karnak on the Brittany coast of France. I'm excited to announce that a moving point of balance will be displayed once again in the near future at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art after being in storage for over 40 years. Yay! Furthermore, the work will be shown alongside with the work of her daughter, Julianne Swartz, who is a remarkable sound artist who also deals with similar themes of energy and healing. Such a project would have been in total alignment with Hilma af Klint's creation of her monolithic series titled Paintings for the Temple, installed together in one space for the first time at the Guggenheim Museum, whose architectural structure mirrored what her original desire to have them installed in was, which was a spiral shape. So again, the wonderful architecture was perfect. Hilma, like Beth, wanted to create environments where art would directly instigate healing and participate in revealing otherworldly messages channeled through the artist's hands. Rudolf Steiner, in an offshoot of Theosophy, in his temple headquarters in Switzerland, utilized Besant's shapes and colors as expressed in thought forms to create a sacred space for learning and spiritual advancement. Perhaps you guys have heard of the Waldorf schools everywhere in the United States, of course, which teach Steiner ideas to children. Steiner introduced into Theosophy Rosicrucianism and also alchemical notions of art as a vehicle for transformation. In the image you see here of the Aurora Consurgens, which is an illustration from a 16th century alchemical manuscript, it shows a very interesting stage in the alchemical process. It is a popular misconception that alchemy was only about the changing of lead into gold. It also had important philosophical components that stressed in the various stages of distillation, which were likened to chemical processes, that it was our journey towards understanding the divine. The final process, called the philosopher's stone, was represented by the androgen, or the sacred blending of male and female energies into a unified whole. This idea would greatly inspire feminist artists in the future, and that topic is for another day, but we can see it maybe in the question-answer period. We can talk about how important this idea of non-binary sexuality is now. Alrighty. In one piece from Healing Our Sacred Wounds by Beth, the series from 1991, she takes on an ecofeminist statement that includes esoteric ideology. Her triptych altar form reads from left to right. The first has a celestial male entity standing on our planet and bleeding from the heart. The central panel displays a giant wound, like depictions of the wounds of Christ, but here in its vulva-like shape represents the wounds of Earth itself, suffering from a patriarchal rule that allows for pollution and promotes war. In the final panel, Swartz has superimposed a female figure onto the male figure with a mended heart. Thus, the sacred androgen of alchemy, with its promise of harmony between male and female energies, saves the day. After completing her A Moving Point of Balance series, Swartz wanted to continue exploring the relationship between art and healing. And in this 1986 series, Trans Illumination, she conducted individual sittings with people where she acted as a psychic reader. She asked them to choose 3 colored oil pastels and for them to divide the paper into 7 areas. Again, 7 corresponding to the 7 chakras. Together in silence, they would focus, and then she would tune in or trans-illuminate on a particular part of their body. Sensing information, she would sketch it out and later translate it into a larger painting. Participants were often astounded by the accuracy of these readings, particularly regarding their health. In this, again, Swartz was following certain historic precedents, entirely unknown to her, by the way. For example, the work of the Swiss Emma Kunz, an artist discovered alongside Hilma af Klint, and they're often exhibited together. Kunz had a long practice conducting psychic readings, utilizing a pendulum. She would stand over a table with a sheet of graph paper, and focusing in on it and on an individual, she would follow the pendulum as it moved across the paper, and then she would mark it on the graph. Later, she filled it in. She would often stand for over 20 hours working on it because she couldn't break the trance. And the resulting drawings were completed, again, always in one sitting. And you can see a bunch of them. This is what they look like. I can't tell you what these look like in person. It's hard to even believe it. It's so complicated. And she did work with a ruler, but the intricacy and the color. Now, she said that these were charts of an individual's physical and psychic makeup. It indicated their health concerns and even their future. She was able to read these abstract shapes as if it was a language, and she frequently would tell people, in the future, everyone will be able to understand this. We're not ready now. She even experimented using her pendulum over plants and made them grow bigger and quicker. And she had clients from all over Europe, and her healing center is thriving today. And you can go visit it. It's right outside Zurich, and you can sit in her crystal cave. It's great. But we can go even further back to another woman artist who channeled psychic forces meant to heal and who utilized abstract visual language. A recently rediscovered and remarkable example of this was Georgiana Houghton, a spiritualist who in 1860s began to do psychic portraits of both living and deceased and other entities. Okay, what is remarkable about her work is that it is entirely abstract. Decades before the invention of abstraction by men, she never had an art class. And when you see these works, you have to take a magnifying glass because, again, the layers upon layers upon layers of colors, it's watercolor, gouache, colored pencil. There isn't even one error, right? One mismark. She often painted them in the dark. She didn't even look at the paper, and she insisted she didn't do them, that they were guided by other forces working through her. So they're really quite remarkable. And again, undiscovered. They were found in a warehouse in an Australian, I think, spiritualist defunct organization, and just shown very recently. Another aspect of Swartz's work that needs to be considered is her preference for working in series, as here in A Story for the 11th Hour from 1993. All of the artists we have seen so far worked in series. Why? In order to express their idea of unfoldment and evolutionary processes, especially spiritually. It's never static, always moving, always unfolding. Swartz incorporating visual elements from philosophical and religious systems, from many different places, as we've seen before: yoga, chakras, Indigenous American symbols, Kabbalah, Buddhism, Theosophy, Christianity. It's a new symbolic myth that unfolds with titles such as childhood, maturity, initiation, integration, transformation. Although it's her personal cosmology, they invite the viewer to reflect on their own creation myths and to realize we are all on our own journey of being, and that to evolve, we must die to one story and be reborn into another larger one. Swartz's beautiful series immediately brought to mind a body of 8 gouaches by Helma af Klint that recently came to light, called The Tree of Knowledge from 1907. They operate in a similar way, utilizing her own esoteric abstract language, again, probably based on the Tree of Life. And you can see here how each individual drawing morphs and changes and evolves. I want you to know I worked on this for a hellish 6 months. And just trying to figure out what she was doing was so difficult from her journals and notebooks, which constitute, I think, about 60,000 pages that are being translated from Swedish as we speak. Swartz's Celestial Visitation series is based on Kabbalistic systems concerning the relationship between man, Torah, the commandments, and God. In Jewish mysticism, each time we do a mitzvah or a good deed in this world, we create an angel in the next. Angelic entities have a long history, of course, in art. And for that matter, in occultism, they are often channeled by mediums who deliver their messages in text and drawings, such as those by Grant Wallace, again, found in the attic by his grandson. It's a remarkable series of works of channeled entities by a person who never went to art school. Beth's angels have no heads, but they're just beautiful, beating wings of vibrating color. I really like this series. It's one of my favorites. And when her mother was dying, to help her transition, she created the Angel of Deliverance that you see here. When she finished the work, which, like all the pieces in the series, is embedded with healing crystals and stones, the nurse's aide to her mother said that when the time came for her mother to pass, she rose up with her arms outstretched and said, "I'm ready, take me." One of the truly remarkable aspects of Swartz's work is her performative use of ritual, and that is often documented in photography. From 1976 to 77, she wanted to work with the element of fire as a force of destruction and regeneration. She made pilgrimages to remote sites where she developed a process ritual that began by emptying her mind and praying, then unrolling paper and mutilating the surface, setting it on fire, and then adding onto it earth, pigment, gold leaf. This process was then repeated in overlaying sheets, and she bonded them together with Roblex. And the resulting artwork, when finished, possesses a stiff, resistant, but malleable nature that allows these large pieces a non-static, volumetric shape when hung. This incredible diagram belongs to her as well from her 1980 series, Israel Revisited, an incredibly ambitious project that deals with the Kabbalistic concept of the feminine face of God. And you can see here her Tree of Life diagram, and with it, she's associating 10 sites with women who symbolize the message. Oh, and I'm going to say this wrong. Shekinah. Wrong? Yeah. Okay. Shekinah. You can see that I need help. Locations of divine presence. But here's really what I want to say. Why don't we equate her work with Anna Mendieta, the Cuban American artist who was always doing work out in nature, dealing with the elements, earth, wind, and fire, that were meant to heal her ruptured relationship from Cuba, where she was torn. Right? She would go out and work in nature. And I think the similarity is really quite remarkable between the two of them. Fire, used as an element for the fundamental oppositions of destruction and creation. So again, I had to show you this wonderful photograph of her praying and meditating before beginning the ritual process. And the rainbow light appears, and I'm sorry, but I don't think it's a photographic anomaly. Anyway, you saw many of these beautiful images in the film. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up because I could go on forever, but I just wanted to again to show you another of the series, the Shen-Chi. And although there's not enough time to really go into it, it's another healing series, this time studying a different series and meant to cure her own chronic fatigue. She uses gold leaf to represent the glow of vitality emanating from healthy bodies and minds. But painted underneath the golden surface are sacred symbols from diverse traditions. We are attracted to the shimmering gold surface, but all the while the true value lies underneath it. So these works are meant to affect healing and are thus not just intellectual works of art, they're actually magical objects meant to transform and transmute the viewer. Here's another beautiful series, 13 Moon, from 2005 through 2013, so much more recent. And I just couldn't resist comparing them to the beautiful Agnes Pelton landscape. So these poetic, nocturnal, lunar landscapes, like Pelton, are steeped in nature's hidden forces. And I'll end with this beautiful painting. It's a stunning example from 2023 of the Quantum series titled Future Waves of Time. It's as if we are standing and gazing up at the starry firmament, exploding with life and otherworldly energies. I can't help but think of Van Gogh. At 88, Beth Ames Swartz is still contemplating the mysteries of the universe and her place in it. Thank you. We have a moment or two if you had a question, or we can go straight to the dialogue. What? We're good? Go to the dialogue?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Why don't you ask me a question? I've been doing a lot of talking.
Well, I'm overwhelmed. I just feel so grateful that you came. You know, Susan got up at 5 o'clock and drove at 5:30 from upstate New York to JFK in a raging snowstorm.
I I did. I did. Was not fun. I did.
And she gets up at 3 o'clock tomorrow and missed a whole week of school.
That was good.
The way I met Susan is through my daughter, Julianne, who is one of the great loves of my life. And she's an artist in New York, and they both teach at Bard. And she said, it was about 5 years ago, she said, oh, please make lunch for my friend Susan. She's wonderful. So I made lunch, and she came into the studio and was sort of, oh, wow, I want to come back. And she's back.
I'm coming back again.
I guess what I ask you is, what got you interested in esoterica and spirituality? Was it meeting Leonora, or were you interested in that before?
No, actually, it wasn't Leonora. That's what led me to her. I grew up in California and in the Bay Area, and from a very early age, I would go to the library and read theosophical books. I think I'm the only 12-year-old who read The Secret Doctrine. And I was really, really attracted to it. And then I started to read a lot of other kind of New Age literature. And when I went to college at UCLA, I would go to the Philosophical Research Society. I don't know if you know that, run by Manly Hall, who wrote Secret Teachings of All Ages. And as an art historian, I learned that I better keep quiet. It was a forbidden subject. You were considered a non-serious person. You can never talk about religion in general, except maybe in certain contexts, but definitely not anything esoteric. So when I finally met Leonora Carrington, who hated art historians, it took me, I don't know, maybe 7 years. She would slam the door in my face. The only way I got to her was I brought her a check from her gallery. But she was shocked that I actually knew what she was doing, so that's why I think we hit it off. And so, no, it's been all on my own. And now for the first time, I can openly come out of the closet and study esoterica. I can.
And me too, finally.
Me too. We're both out. We're both out now.
Finally, I can come out of the closet. You know, the healing portraits were so accurate that they scared me.
Yeah.
They were so accurate. And the whole idea of synchronicity, there's so much of this meaningful coincidence that this is like a miracle, this whole encounter with you.
Well, I think things are really changing. As a professor, I teach classes on alchemy, spiritualism, Freemasonry. Right now I'm teaching a class called The American Afterlife. And I have literally like hundreds of students applying. I have to turn them down. They're really, young people are really interested in spirituality. No one will talk to them during a worldwide pandemic about death. And they're afraid. And I think that it's really healthy.
You want to talk about my new work?
Yes.
Well, I'll be 88 February 5th. And I'm not afraid to say it, because people are disappearing all around me. And I'm getting younger and younger friends. Thank goodness for the artists. I love my husband John, who's my secret weapon. He's so wonderful. He makes fun of me when I say my artist, because I've run this breakfast club now for 25 years, and I have friends, and they're so wonderful, and I feel honored to be in their company, but I need them more than they need me, because it weighs on me. Like, I lost 8 friends in the last, 8 months, and they just disappear. And so I started reading quantum physics. And I have a couple of books to recommend if anybody's interested. There's, they're discovering so much now. It's amazing about time and light, and many of the stars you see are thousands and thousands of years old, and time, the whole time, light, the continuum is incredible, and they're doing all this research and finding that nothing really is solid. Everything, a particle is also a wave, and light, there's just so much to learn. And so I decided when I was a little girl, I hope you don't think less of me for telling you this story, but I would look out at the sky and think that everybody who died became a star. And now, at my age and stage of life, it's very comforting. And so I started experimenting, because with my work, it never is fully formed. Sometimes it takes a whole year to do the first piece. When I did Moving Point of Balance, it took a whole year, because every time I do a new series and have this idea and try to make it a reality, it's like the archaic age of a civilization, and then eventually the golden age, and then it starts to get repetitive. You've learned as far as you can learn, or done as far as you can go, and I leave it. And so with this series, I don't know where it's going to go, but it's coming out fully formed in a way, because I think that was a nice painting, and it's one of the very first.
Beautiful.
But thank God my friend Fausto came over, and because even at this age and stage, it's hard to really know. You're so busy looking at, and it's not easy to be an artist in this culture.
Well, yes, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I have a question that's really been haunting me, and that is your self-created rituals. I think very early on you started to have your own ritual practice. That's very unusual. Where did that come from?
It's interesting. My mother thought religion was a lot of bunk. She wasn't religious. Our parents weren't religious, but the living room was floor-to-ceiling books. And I think I was thirsty for a relationship with a higher power, or God. That's why I was so thrilled to find the Shekhinah. And it just became, I guess it was my form of trying to make sense of the universe. As my friend George Land said, when I asked him, how does the universe work? He said, we have order and disorder, but we need more order than disorder. But I didn't like the idea of entropy from the very beginning, that you just live and you die and it's all over. And of course I'm getting closer to that area, so naturally I'm not too thrilled about it. So instead of just doing life, death, I did life, death, rebirth, ordering, disordering, reordering. And I guess I created the ritual from a need to make sense out of life.
Well, thank you. I think you evaded the question very nicely. Ritual is a series of bodily movements whereby you draw in energies from sources, mysterious sources, and you use them to affect some kind of a change. And you use them, I think, to mark your work, to infuse it with literal magical energy. And you don't seem like the type to me, but you did it. It's really It's like you were
Well,
being
Thank you.
guided while
You're,
you
you're
did it.
actually interpreting
sight
something
do it?
that I did just intuitively, naturally.
Do you think the energies from the sites, the locations you were at,
I think that's
participated in that?
I think that's part of it. Also, Edmund Sennett wrote a book in the 60s called The Biology of the Spirit. And of course, I did read a lot of Carl Jung. And I think I've always been a seeker. But I didn't know any of what you just said. That was not conscious at all.
Hey, I saw that secret doctrine on your bookcase in
That's
the movie,
It's-
right? You saw that. You're a big reader, and I
Yeah,
think you
yeah, I've
let
been-
that influence. Well, I
But-
think we have time for one more question. Okay, so let me ask you this. You seem like a very lovely, polite, well-behaving person, but I think I know better. Is the only, like, considering all of the prejudice against spirituality during your career in a very hostile art world, especially as a woman, as a single mother at a certain point, how did you have the strength and the fortitude to keep working nevertheless?
I think it kept me alive. Quite from the very beginning, I didn't feel I deserved to live because I was beaten so much. And you know, the thing is, I needed art more than it needed me. I needed to do it to stay alive. And I was able to really heal myself. Sure, I've had therapy in that, but I was able to actually go through the process of transformation. That's why I like to. Years ago, I called myself a transformative artist, but that didn't work because there was a lot of prejudice against that as well. How did I do it? I just feel very grateful that I'm still alive.
Well, I think you did it because you felt that you had to give it to the world to heal the world.
Well,
So,
thank you. Well,
I
I'll
thank
tell
you
you,
for that.
Tikkun Olam did come to me through my childhood. Mitzvah doing and Tikkun Olam. It is our job to try to help to make the world a better place, the healing of the world. What other reason is there?
there are, yeah.